Now, as the NHS continues to celebrate its 70th year, my next guest has won celebrity fans around the world. Nurse Christie Watson has shared her experience of what life was really like working on the front line of the NHS for 20 years in her new book, The Language of Kindness, a Nurse's Story. So it must have been almost difficult to see what you were going to draw from almost for the book, because there was just so much.
Yeah, there are lots and lots of memories. And you could pick any one of them, really. But I guess it's like any job, and many people stay with you for different reasons. And the people that I picked out to describe their experiences in the book are the ones that may have reminded me of a family member, or I had a really difficult time with, or a particularly happy time. So I wanted to give a kind of broad overview of what it's like to be in the NHS as a nurse.
Yes, and it isn't easy, basically. And I mean, being a nurse is an all-encompassing job. And I think, as you described it, a nurse's job is less well-defined than that of a doctor. Suddenly, a nurse covers so many different spectrums that you maybe you weren't even aware of before starting the job. You had a lot of boxes to tick.
Yeah, I used to think that nursing was about biology and chemistry and all the things that we know about, but actually it's much wider than that. It's about politics and art. It's not one art, actually, it's all the arts, it's all the humanities, it's all the sciences. And it's really hard to get into language, which is why perhaps we haven't heard from nurses before. Yeah, I think that there was a big gap, and I'm hoping that we'll hear lots from other nurses and other midwives, because it's such an important voice to hear. But there was a real lack of a nurse's voice in publishing and in the media as well, actually. And yet every single one of us at some stage in our life will be nursed. We'll all come across a nurse at some stage, and everyone's got a story about a nurse in their family or a friend who's a nurse. So it's something really universal.
It's really interesting as well when you lost your dad, and for the first time you were on the other side of it, and you really appreciated that kindness that you talk about in the book and the dignity that a nurse has for a patient, and you experienced that firsthand.
Yeah, I think being on the other side of the fence did give me that insight into the importance of kindness and those small things that make such a huge difference. And I think a nurse's job to provide dignity in the face of illness is the greatest gift that a nurse can give. And these things might seem like tiny actions, changing a bed when somebody's really sick, holding a patient's hand, but actually to support somebody at their frailest and most significant moments of their life, what a great gift, and what a huge privilege that is.
Of course. And you talk about Betty in the book, and I thought that story was really quite interesting, because it was just about companionship in that moment, wasn't it, for that lady?
Yeah, and so many of our patients now come into hospital with not just one illness that can be treated by technology or medicine, but people are a complex ball of emotional, mental illnesses, as well as physical problems. They've got lots and lots going on. And Betty came in, she was elderly, she was frail, she was alone, she hadn't been eating. It turned out she hadn't had her heating on because she couldn't afford her fuel bills. And so she was freezing cold, her husband had died, and really all I did was just be with her. I made her a cup of tea and found her a sandwich, and I listened to her stories. And afterwards she said I'd saved her life, which I hadn't done at all. I'd done no such thing. I'd just been with her. But the chance to provide that comfort during people's darkest hours, I think that's the real true nature of the job of a nurse.
Of course. And then, of course, taking an awful lot of it home with you as well. I mean, that's a difficult thing to switch off from, to cut those emotions and go home and have your own life.
Yeah, it is. It's a tough job. I think nursing's the hardest job in the world, but it's also the best job in the world. And it gives more gifts than the things that it takes. And you do get tired and burnt out, but there's always a patient that reminds you just what a huge and important job that you're doing. And most of the time, it's hugely rewarding, despite the pressures that nurses face on a daily basis. The vast majority of nurses give so much of themselves.
Of course they do.
Yeah,
and this book is the voice of that, I think, and that's why it is such an important book, and it's why you've got so many celebrity fans, as well as praise from all over the world. We've mentioned on the show already Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones. I think she just described you as being this absolutely breathtaking woman, and you've had a real influence on her. I mean, that actually must mean something to you, I guess.
That's huge. I was really overwhelmed and obviously super excited. And I think the first person I told was my daughter, who's 13, and she had no idea who Emilia Clarke is, because obviously she can't watch Game of Thrones and all the things she's in. But actually, it's fantastic to have this support. But the things I think that mean the most are the everyday people that you meet in your job, the other nurses that come up to me and say, thanks for writing this book. We're so glad that there's a voice of a nurse out there, and hopefully there'll be lots more. And relatives who actually really mean it when they say, thank you so much for being with my relative, my family member at that time. And those are the things that I think matter the most.